We're there.
Are we there? Are we
start on time, ladies and gentlemen, and assembled company. Welcome.
Okay, John, we're ready.
Okay. Yeah, I've got it. And now we're ready. Fantastic. Ali and I are talking to each other. That we got a can each end with a string that goes all the way from Swindon to Marrakesh, and we're talking to each other down the tin can. And that's the truth. Call me a storyteller if I'm lying. But anyway, tonight is Monday night, so it's connecting the world by stories. So we've got several guests. We've got we've got Shane Ibbs, who I famously met first in the middle of a wood, and Colin Owen, who I've yet to meet in the flesh, and I can't wait to get out to Cadi Antrim to meet you. And
me too.
And I never know what Colin's going to do. It could be a song, it could be a story, it could be a poem, it could be anything. We might find him just standing on his head and speaking through his feet. I don't know. And we've got Kerry, who's been joining us for the last few weeks. Fantastic. She's come on with a poem. It could be on subject. It could be off the subject. We don't care. We are merely here to encourage and expand the world of whatever it is we're expanding the world of. We've got Gary, who I promised to put on last because Gary hasn't grown a third or fifth head, having had his injection today. He's not picking up 5G on his left ear. At least I don't think so. But maybe he's talking to us without the aid of machinery now, having had his jab. I don't know. But right now, to kick us off, with the theme tonight is rags to riches. But nothing is certain. Nothing's absolutely certain. We might have something that is totally off topic, and I've never been a very good dictator, so I don't actually care. But right now, if he's ready, and that is a particularly we get a lot of beards on this. We've got several magnificent. Well, mine is incredibly tatty. We've got Norman up there in Canada with an extremely well-groomed beard. It might be a well-groomed beard, I'm not sure, but a well-groomed beard. We've got David Thompson in Austin, in Texas. Yours is a fairly well-groomed. Yeah, it's a very well-groomed. It's the sort of beard you'd be proud to go out in. And we've got Shane with a beard you might find in the middle of a nature trail. So Shane, I'm going to hand over to you for the first story.
Okay, thanks. I'm in this thing called the Mustachio Club, which is it's basically men with beards actually, but there is one or two people without a beard, and some of the women actually they crochet or knit beards that they kind of hang on their ears and and it's just quite a lot of fun. So rags to riches. Well, this is the truth. There's more than one occasion that I've taken the family rags when I was a kid to the rag and bone yard and sold them for a few pennies and threepences and sixpences as they were in those days, and maybe bought the dinner for the day. And that's not a lie, actually. It's many's the time I've taken rags to the rag and bone yard.
There, Shane, because I do. You're quite used to me interrupting you in the middle of a story, so there's some people I wouldn't do this to, but there's some people I feel quite comfortable. And if Kerry remembers Southgate's yard on Grove Lane in Ipswich, it was a scrapyard, but when it started, it was started by old man Southgate, and he still kept a wooden hut in there, which was surrounded by old uniforms, you could take rag to him, and he had one of those, the big scales outside, and he was one of the last people in Ipswich taking rag. And That's what you did. If you ran out of money and the children are growing out of all the clothes, you'd fill a bag full and take them down there, and you might get half a crown if you're really lucky. Now, do carry on with your story, Shane. And
Thank you.
sorry for interrupting you.
And occasionally you might find a bit of electricity wiring with some copper, and you thought, we're going to be millionaires. But then you take it there as like a 9, 10, 11-year-old boy, and you realize that you need a lot of copper wire to be a millionaire. But anyway, so rags to riches. So I thought, what story should I tell? And I'm going to tell a story that I absolutely adore. And I'm just trying to get myself just in the zone. I just need to kind of get into that storytelling place. I'm just going to pretend I can play a drum for a moment. Once there was, and once there wasn't, a boy who lived just with his father. His mother had sadly died several years previously. The lad was about 8 or 9 years of age. And one day his father said, sit down at the table, son. Well, they didn't have much more than a wooden table and a couple of wooden chairs and a few bits, but that's pretty much all they had. And his father said to him, son, one day you will have to find your own way in the world. Until that day, watch everything I do, observe what you can, learn what you can, and pay heed to nature and see what you see. Yes, father, said the boy, not really understanding what his father was trying to get him to do. Well, the months and the years went past, and he watched father doing this and fixing that and all manner of things. And he watched the animals and the creatures. And before he knew it, he was a young lad of, we'll say 16. Might have only been 14. They kicked you out quite young in those days, but we'll say he was about 16. And his father said, son, can you sit at the table? And he sat down at the table. Yes, father. Father said, my son, today is the day when you need to find your way in the world. But I want to give you some things before you go. And his father turned and he took down from the mantel shelf a sword, and he put that on the table. And he said, my son, this was my father's sword, and it was his father's sword, and it was his father's sword, and it was his father's sword. This sword has been in our family for a very long time. Take this sword with you. The boy took the sword and put it through his leather belt. And then father got a loaf of bread and put a loaf of bread on the table. Well, this was a time, if you had a whole loaf of bread, consider yourself rich. Father put a whole loaf of bread on the table and said, you must take this with you too. And then father got an old sack and he put that on the table. And he said, my son, this is all you will need. So the boy put the bread in the sack on his shoulder. He hugged and kissed his father goodbye, and he left. And he walked and he walked and he walked. He walked over mountains. He walked through valleys. He walked along rivers. He walked through forests. On and on he went, seeing all manner of things. One day, there was a clearing with a few scrubby bits and a few rocks. And he went out walking across that piece of ground. And in the distance, he could hear an argument. So he snuck up gradually. He'd behind a rock and he looked round the rock. And there was a lion, a falcon, and an ant. And they were arguing over a dead horse that laid in front of them. They were arguing and shouting and cursing each other and arguing. And the boy was kind of looking and looking. And the lion saw him. Boy, come here, come here. The boy looked around and the lion said, do not be afraid. Come here, boy. And the boy walked across. And the lion said to him, boy, we have a problem. We have this dead horse. We are starving hungry. We can't decide how to divide it up. Do you know what we should do? Said the boy. Well, lion, you're a large creature. You should have most of the horse. Falcon, you have a delicate stomach. You should have the liver and the lights and the kidney and the heart. And ant, well, you can have the skull, for you can get into all those nooks and crannies, and there is a lot of meat on a horse's skull. Well, they thought it was a splendid idea. And the lion said, we want to give you a reward, give you a wish. And the boy said, I don't need anything. I have everything that I need. But I insist, said the lion. Well, the boy was polite and well brought up. And he said, okay. And the lion stepped forward and said, boy, when you need the heart and strength of a lion, you will have it. The falcon stepped up. Boy, when you need to fly like a falcon, you will have it. And the ant stepped forward and said, boy, when you need to be an ant, you will have it. Well, the boy, being very polite, thanked them very much, bid them farewell, and off he walked. And as he walked, he was thinking, I'm not sure what I'll need any of those things for. But, you know, I don't know about you. If someone told me that I could fly like a falcon, I would want to try. Well, this boy was like you. He thought, I wonder. And he stood there, and suddenly he became a falcon, and he soared high up into the sky. And there he hovered on the thermals, looking around, and he could see everything. In the distance, he saw a castle, and he flew towards the castle. And at the end of the castle, there was a tower. Beside that was a tree. And the falcon landed on the tree, right by the window. Inside that tower was a princess, locked in the tower. She saw the falcon. She went over to the window and opened the window. She put out her arm, and the falcon hopped onto her arm. And she went into the room, and she had an empty bird cage in there hanging on a stand. And she opened that cage, and the falcon gladly hopped into the cage, and she did up the little door on the cage. Well, that evening, the princess, she had her meal brought to her. She was locked back in. She read a little before she went to sleep, and she laid in her bed, and she fell fast asleep. Now, the falcon, who was really the boy, well, he turned into an ant, and he squeezed in between those bars, down the stem, across the floor. When he got to the princess's bed, he turned back into the boy, and he woke her up. And she screamed, there's a troll in my room, there's a troll in my room. Soon after that, you could hear the king come running down the hallway. The door burst open wide. The bird was already back in the cage. The king stepped into the room. What is it? What is it? He said. She said, there's a troll in the room. There's a troll in the room. Well, the king, he looked behind the curtains, and there was nothing there. He looked underneath the bed. There was nothing there. He looked into the wardrobe. There was nothing there. He turned to his daughter and the princess and said, my dear, you're just having a bad dream. Now go to sleep. And he locked her back in her room. And the princess soon fell back to sleep. And the falcon once again turned into an ant, through the bars, down, back as the boy. He woke the princess up again, and the same thing, exactly the same thing. She screamed, there's a troll in the room, there's a troll in the room. The king came running down the corridor, and he opened the door and burst the door. The falcon was back in its cage. There's a troll in the room, there's a troll in the room, father. He looked behind the curtains. There was nothing there. He looked underneath the bed. There was nothing there. He looked into the wardrobe. There was nothing there. There's nothing here. You're having a nightmare. Now go back to sleep. And he locked her in once again. It took her a little bit longer to fall asleep this time. But eventually she fell asleep. And the falcon rather, once again turned into an ant, threw across, became the boy, sat beside her. And then he thought for a moment. And very gently, he called out, wake up, wake up. And she opened her eyes. Don't scream, don't scream. And she looked at him and she said, who are you? And he said, I'm just a boy trying to find my way. Why are you locked in here? Ah, said the princess. Well, I have two other sisters, but they've been taken by the trolls. And I'm in here for my own safety, for the nine-headed troll himself wants me for his wife. And I don't want to be married to a nine-headed troll. So my father locks me in here every day for my own safety. Said the boy. I feel I could help you somehow. I could fight the troll or something. And well, the princess said, well, first you have to get past his dragon. His dragon comes once a week here. We have to give him cows and sheep and all manner of creatures to keep him happy. And he takes it back off to the mountains. Well, I'll fight the dragon. You can't, she said. It's ferocious. It's got 9 heads. It's a huge dragon. I will fight the dragon, said the boy. Tell your father. She summoned her father and the king. Well, boy, what is it you've got to say? He said, I will fight that dragon and I will slay him. You, a little boy, could kill a 9-headed dragon. We could give it a try, I suppose. You're nobody to me. Okay, boy, the next time he's here, you can try and fight him. Well, the day came when the dragon was due, same day every week. And the boy prepared himself. He got his sword ready. He stepped out into the courtyard and he stood there with the courage of a lion. And suddenly that 9-headed dragon came swooping out of the sky down on him. He drew his sword and he went at the lion. He went at the dragon with the ferocity of a lion, and he cut off 1 head, 2 heads, 3 heads. And the dragon breathed fire at him and wrestled with him. You could hear the clatter of steel on the stone flagstones and the scratching, the claws of the dragon as it tried to get itself onto the boy and clamp its jaws on him. And they fought on and on, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th head. And still they fought and battled until there was 1 head, the largest head, the main head of the dragon, full of teeth. And it bared down on the boy. And as he did, he stepped to one side and he took a swipe and he took off the 9th head. And there the dragon lay, slayed. And the king couldn't believe what he'd seen. Good heavens, said the king. Well, I can't believe what I've just witnessed. Boy, one day when you are a man, you will make this daughter a fine husband. That is my pledge to you. But first, you must find the other 2 princesses and bring them back here. The boy said, I will. Well, of course, the days went by and the days went by, and the boy was thinking about how he had no idea where these princesses were and what they were going to do. But he began to walk with the princess from the tower. The father released her and allowed them to walk into the rose garden. And they began to walk together and talk, and they would sit and they would pick a rose and give each other a rose. And they would write each other poetry and read poetry to each other. And well, the truth be known, they were beginning to fall in love. One day they sat there holding each other's hands, and the 9-headed troll himself came leaping into the garden, a huge troll, 9 heads. He grabbed hold of the princess, and with a mighty leap, he was over the castle wall, and he was gone with the princess. The boy ran to the king. King, the troll has come and taken the princess. He's taken the princess. And the king said, boy, get after them. Get after them, boy. Well, the boy thought for a moment, falcon. And he turned into a falcon and he shot up into the sky as fast as he possibly could. But that troll, he had long legs and he was well gone. Well gone. The boy couldn't find him anywhere. He flew around as that falcon. He flew around and around. And then he noticed an island in the distance. And there was something about this island that was as if it was calling out to him. And he flew down and he landed. And as soon as he landed, he became the boy. And he walked around all of this small island. He just sensed that there was something about this island. And he kept coming back to this place where there was a large rock. And he knew he was to be inside this rock. And there was just a little split. He thought, how can I get inside here? And of course, he thought, and he became an ant again. And he crept inside that little crack, and down, down, and down he went. And he crawled along a chamber until he came to an oak door. And he crept under the oak door. And when he got the other side, he looked and he couldn't believe the size of this 3-headed troll that stood there. And there was one of the princesses, one of the sisters, and she was combing the hair on the head, the 3 heads of this troll. And she was delousing him actually. And she was kind of getting all the lice and the nits out of his hair. Well, the ant crept through that room, along another corridor, along deeper and darker he went, until he came to a second oak door. And he crept underneath that. And he couldn't believe his eyes, for there was a six-headed troll, even larger than the first, a huge troll. And there was the second sister, the second princess. She was combing his hair too, removing all the lice from his hair. On he went, down deeper and deeper and deeper, till he came to a third oak door. And he crept underneath that door, and when he looked, it was the biggest troll he'd ever seen. 9 heads, and his princess was there. He had her captured, and she was combing his hair. Well, the ant crept across onto her shoe and gave her a little nip on her ankle. And she knew who it was. And she said to the troll, Troll, would you excuse me for a moment? I just need to powder my nose. Okay, don't be long, said the troll. And she went outside the room, and the ant became the boy. And the boy said to the girl, the princess, have you asked him if he'll release you? I haven't, she said. Have you asked him if he'll let you see your father again? I haven't, she said. Ask him these questions. And the boy became the ant once again and was back on her shoe. And she went back into the room, and she picked up her comb, and she carried on combing the hair on his 9 heads. And she said to him, do you think you'll ever let me see my father again? Your father? Unlikely. Do you think you'll ever release me from here? Never. You will die here. You will be my wife, and then you will die here. There is a way to get you out of here, but no one knows but me. If someone could slay my dragon and go to its largest head and lift up its tongue, underneath there is a grain of sand. If they could bring that grain of sand back here and drop it in that rock way above us, it would destroy all us trolls instantly. But no one knows, so you're doomed to stay with me. Well, the boy heard all of this, and that little ant crawled off her foot and went back out underneath that door, through those chambers and corridors, through those other 2 rooms, and he squeezed out of that rock, and he immediately turned into a falcon, and he flew back to the castle as fast as he possibly could. And when he got back there, well, the dragon was still in the courtyard. Blood, heads everywhere. The cleaners hadn't come. I think they sacked the cleaners after that. They got a more swifter cleaners. But anyway, there was blood and heads everywhere. And the boy went up to the largest head, and he opened the jaws of that dragon, and he lifted up its tongue. And sure enough, it was a grain of sand. He put it in his mouth. He turned into a falcon, and he took off and went as fast as he could. But it had been a long day. The sun went down, nighttime came, and it was pitch black, and he couldn't see where he was going, and he was exhausted. He needed to rest. So he came down and down and down and down, and he landed, and he immediately fell asleep. Well, when he woke the next morning and opened his eyes, he could hear the sea. The sea was crashing in. He was on a beach. And he looked around, and he felt for the grain of sand was not in his mouth. Well, he spent all day up and down, looking and looking and looking and looking all day, and he couldn't find a grain of sand. Well, he went to sleep that night on the same beach. He woke up as soon as that sun came up the next morning. He was up all day, up and down the beach, looking and looking. He thought, I will never find a grain of sand on a beach. That is impossible. I won't be able to release the princess. If only I could find this grain of sand. Up and down and up and down. Well, the sun went down and it became dark. He had to sleep once again on the beach. The next morning, the sun came up. He was immediately up with the sun, looking all day. Well, that night the sun went down and the moon began to come up, and there was a little bit of moonlight, and he carried on through the evening. And he looked and looked and looked, and eventually there was the grain of sand right by his feet. The very grain of sand, he recognized it immediately. He put it into his mouth, he turned into a falcon, and he took off, and he flew back to that island as fast as he possibly could. He landed by the rock. He took that grain of sand out of his mouth, and he dropped it in that crack, and immediately all the trolls shattered into thousands of pieces, and they were no more. And he stood there looking at the rock, and suddenly there was a grinding and a grinding and a vibration, and the rock began to split open and open and open and open, and out came the three princesses. And then there were more vibrations, and suddenly a golden castle just grew out of where this rock stood. Well, the boy, who was by this time a young man, took the three princesses back home to their father. The king couldn't believe that this boy, who was now a man, had got his three daughters back, his sweet, sweet daughters. And he said, "Young man, you will make a fine husband for my daughter." And they were duly married. And they went and lived in that golden castle. And they had a wonderful family and a wonderful life. And that's the story of the boy, the lion, the falcon, and the ant.
Oh, thank you, Shane. What a way to kick off the evening. Fantastic. Oh, now we're going to leave Chelmsford and come up the A12 a bit, and we're going to turn round the bypass, not towards Stowmarket. We're going to turn the other way towards Felixstowe, and then we're going to leap up, and we're going up past Martlesham, and we're going to turn up into Woodbridge, and if I'm really lucky, sitting on that junction waiting for me will be Kerry Mussington with a poem. So, Kerry, have you got a poem for us?
I have. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I have. It came by when I realised that we were in a world of technology, and I reckon that through technology we get so many rude conversations or rude messages sometimes, and I think we have a choice. And I think what I wanted to show is the choice of through the, it just came to me. I had to create this poem, and I had to create it rather. And it's called Letting the Outside World Affect You. We've learned from a device. So here's a short poem. It's a device. Think twice. Well, it's time for us to leave, for you are hard to please. You called me a fake, and that's your view. I don't care, because who are you? A text, a word, but no human in vision. You don't affect me. It's like watching television. When you have a device, you can always think twice. I can turn off my phone. I can block your words. Mission accomplished. Rudeness not heard. I'm in control. I have a voice. So switching this off is really a choice. You invaded my space and you came to me, an unknown stranger with a history. Now I don't understand who, what, or where, but rudeness I will not take. This I swear. So good luck on your journey, and I wish you well. Respectfully, device, go to hell. I have never met the person behind the device, so I can switch it off and always think twice. I'm in control and I wish you well. I'm taking my space. Victory is swell. God bless you and good luck with your day. It's time to get on. Hip, hip, hooray. There's no time to waste on bitterness and hate. Just move on. It's a lucky escape.
Thank you, Kerry. Now, so it's so good to have you here, just sort of sharing bits and pieces with us.
Yeah.
And I wish I'm really missing Suffolk. It's been a year since I've been up there, and Essex as well, Shane. You know, I've got family both sides of the Stour.
We miss you too, John. We do miss you.
We'll get there. There's a Harlequin Fair thinks it's on, so Maui Wowie thinks it's on. So you know, we'll meet at a few festivals. But and one of the things about doing regular live stuff and story rounds and everything is that if we have a story we're not sure of, we can break it in. And that's a really important process. Of course, there's some people, you know, that are really, you know, sort of intelligent and stuff, and they rehearse it. They rehearse stories. I've never found, if I get a story in my head, unless I tell it to people, it doesn't shape. And so, and normally within a few weeks, if you're working regularly, you've got the story together. You know, you slap it into the middle of a set so no one will notice its weaknesses, and then then you've got it. And I'm sure most of us have done this at some point or another. Kathy's laughing there. Baden's sort of pretending he hasn't. And Gary's just looking wise. And this is one such story, and it kind of starts not in, my character starts not in rags, but he's pretty soon there, and then of course he goes, you know, obviously at rags to riches. That kind of tells you how it's going to work out. But it's a Czech story, and you know, and I think the last time I told it on the internet was about 3 months ago. Instead of, you know, so it's probably no better than it was then. It was pretty ragged then, but it's the devil's little son-in-law. And there was a young lad, Peter, and his dad had died, and he was left in charge of his stepmother. Now, there's a reason why step-parents are villains in stories, because at that time, marriage was all about property. So don't think of it as stereotyping, think of it as a big property fight. And and stepmother tried to steal his whole inheritance. And in the end, she said, no, you're not needed round here. You got to leave. And he said, where am I supposed to go? She said, you can go to the devil for all I care. So if he put on his best clothes. Well, it was only one set, but it was a set his dad had just bought him before he died. So he was fairly well dressed, and he's walking down the road, and he walks to the next farmhouse, big farmhouse, and knocks on the door. And the farmer said, and he says to the farmer, he said, let everyone praise Lord Jesus. It was those kind of days. And the reply was, until Judgment Day. And having got the niceties out the way, the farmer turns to him and said, well, what do you want? He said, well, I'd like a job. And the farmer looked at him, and he's in quite good clothes. He said, it's obvious you've not done a day's work in your life. Actually, he had, but that's by the by. And he said, well, he said, off you go. He said, where am I supposed to go? And the farmer said, well, you can go to the devil as far as I'm concerned. So poor old Peter, he walks into town. And he walked up to the bailiff's house, and he knocked on the door. And the bailiff's wife answered him. And he said, everyone praise Lord Jesus until Judgment Day, she says. He said, what do you want? He said, I'm looking for a job. He said, well, my husband's next door playing cards. I'll pop in and ask him. She goes in now. You know, she should have known better than to interrupt. You know, he wasn't a very nice guy, this bailiff, you know. And especially, you know, some of the women here will know, you know, like you know, blokes think they, you know, they've got sort of like some kind of right to not be disturbed at certain times. And so he said, you know, it's better than you can't disturb me when I'm playing cards, woman, but what do you want? Well, there's a really nice young man out there, and he's looking for a job. Tell him he can go to the devil. Peter walks off down the road. He's thinking, everyone's telling me to go to the devil. If I could find him, you know, I would. This really handsome guy walks past, dressed in green. Now, you know, that green bit sort of, you know, worries me when I've got two people from Ireland sitting in the audience there, because, you know, I don't want to suggest that the devil's Irish, but there's he's a nice guy actually in this story, so don't worry about it. He is dressed in that really fantastic green, and you know, on the Emerald Isle, you know, he'd be cutting, you know, cutting a stance, and there's so anyway, Peter says, "Let everyone praise Lord Jesus." He gets no answer whatsoever. And the handsome fellow looks at him and says, "You look a bit despondent." Peter said, "Well, everyone keeps telling me to go to the devil. If I could find him, I would." "Well, as it happens," says the guy. He said, "Would you be afraid if you met?" No, says Peter. "Well, you know, I am that man, and you'd like a job, would you?" He said, "Yeah, anything." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, come with me. If you work for me for 7 years," I mean, it's a folk tale. It's kind of predictable that there's 7 years involved. And he said, I'll reward you well. Well, Peter's got a big smile on his face now. He goes downstairs. They go through the gates of hell, bit warm down there. And he said, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" And the devil said, "Well, I'm going to show you 3 huge cauldrons. And all you've got to do is keep the fire going underneath each of those cauldrons for 7 years. And I'll pay you well at the end. You mustn't look at them, mind you. You know, if you look inside them, you're out on your ear." Well, actually, the work was fairly easy, you know. So there was a big wood pile. He didn't even have to go and cut the wood. All he had to do was, you know, there was lots of little devils running around. And, you know, actually what he did for most of that 7 years was sat round with the little devils, and they sang songs and they told stories, which doesn't sound like a bad life to me. And there's so, you know, and he keeps going for 7 years, and come 7 years, he turns to the devil. He says, "How much longer I've got to go?" He said, you know, "I've had a great time. I mean, I've had a great time down here, but, you know, I'd love to see it up top, you know, just." The devil said, "Well, as it happens, your 7 years is up. But, you know, actually, after 7 years, your back pay is enormous. You know, you're not even going to carry the sack of gold you deserve. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you this little bag, and whenever you want some gold ducats, you just put your hand in and you pull them out. And if you ever need me, just give us a call." Well, Peter, you know, he's in a bit of a state. I don't know if anyone, you know, I mean, like, even after I spent a weekend or a couple of weeks out, you know, on festivating and sitting around campfires, you know, no one allows me back inside in civilized company, you know, without, you know, like, what's that smell of wood smoke? You know, look at your nails, John. There's and it's a bit like, he said, can I have a wash and sort of trim my hair and, you know, cut my nails?" And devil said, "No, I'm afraid, you know, I tell you, you know, that stuff you got on down here just ain't going to wash off." And he goes, "So, well, everyone will think, you know, everyone will be afraid of me. They'll think I'm the devil." He said, "Well, don't worry about it. Say, I'm not the devil. I'm the devil's little son-in-law." Well, sure enough, off he goes. And he gets to the first village, and he's walking through. And everyone screams and runs inside their houses and their cottages. And he walks towards the inn. And if you've ever done a long walk that lasted for a few days, you'll realize the importance of an inn. somewhere where you can just sit down and you can have a drink and maybe something to eat. And I didn't realize the importance of that till I was walking through the Lake District one day. And I've been walking and walking, and there's still places that call themselves inns. And it was just such a relief. Well, he sees this inn at the end, and you go, oh, the landlord and the landlady see him coming, and they trip each other and get, you know, they're virtually stuck in the doorway, and they're falling over, and Peter sort of pushes them out, goes in, and you know they managed to disentangle themselves. And Peter says, "Look," he sits at a table and sort of shouts up, "Can I have a pitcher of beer, please?" Well, there's a little, no, hardly any more than a child, young boy, orphan boy, that worked for the landlord, slept in the stable. He was little more than a slave, really. And landlord said, "There's a funny looking fella over there taking this pitcher of beer." Well, when he sees Peter, of course, he drops that pitcher, but the pottery breaking everywhere. I mean, the beer's gone, and he goes screaming back to the landlord. Landlord said, "You're going to get that taken out of your wages if I gave you any. Now take this second one." Well, Peter's worked out what's going on, so he's speaking to him very gently. As he comes over, he said, "Don't be afraid." He said, "I'm not the devil. I'm the devil's little son-in-law." And the young lad put the picture down on the table, and they talked for a while. And Peter said, "Actually, you know, your story sounds pretty much like mine." He said, "Yeah, hold out your hat." And the young lad took out his hat and held it in front of Peter, and Peter went into the bag, and he filled the young lad's hat with golden ducats. Well, the young lad went outside and showed the pub the landlord, the inn, and his wife, you know, look what I got. Well, Peter goes up to bed, and found he's, you know, staying there tonight. In the middle of the night, he's shaken. He finds feels someone touching his shoulder. And it's the devil himself. He said, "Quick, down the stable. They're killing the boy to steal his money." Oh, Peter goes running down. He runs in the stable. There's landlord with a huge knife over the young lad, and he's about to stab him. "You stop that now," said Peter. "And I'm sending you straight to hell, and you know I've got the power to do so." Well, the landlord pleaded and pleaded, and Peter said, "Let me think about it overnight." And in the morning, he said he'd come down, and he said, "Look, I'll forgive you, providing you treat this boy well from this day on, and you send him to school, and you don't work him like he was a slave." Actually, give the landlord his due, whether it was because he was that frightened or whether he'd had some kind of, you know, reform in his head, but he did treat that boy well from that day on. And actually, Peter stayed in that inn, and actually, the fame of his magic, this bag with the gold spread right through till the prince heard of it. And landlord said, "The prince is coming to see you, boy." Well, what does he want? Well, the prince he's always broke. He's got no money. And the reason for that is two of his oldest daughters from his first marriage. They're the sort of children that just ask for more and more and more and more. And they kind of use that emotional blackmail. If he refuses, they sort of say, "Oh, you don't love me, love us at all, Daddy, and Mummy's gone." So, but he has got a young daughter from his second marriage. She is fantastic. She's kind, she's beautiful. She never asked for anything. But, you know, I swear when the prince gets here, he's going to ask you for a loan. And sure enough, when the prince comes in, he said, oh, I hear you got a bit of money to spare. Do you think I could borrow some? Have you noticed that? If you ever got a few pennies, you know, you know, that song, Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out is more true than we know, you know, like that's, you know, and so the boy says, yeah, he said, I'll lend you some money. The only condition is that you let me marry one of your daughters. Well, which one? Said the prince. He said, I'm not fussed. You know, just fancy marrying a princess. All right, well, Princey boy he gives him a few, you know, a bag full of gold, just to keep things going. Of course, the two older daughters about that out of his hand before. In the old days when we used to get grants to go to college, you remember that, you know, in the dim and distant past, you know, when I mean, let us not suggest that the welfare state was a good thing or anything, and you know, but and there'd be a grant check three times a year. And I had a grant. I went late to college because it took me a bit of time to work up to it, and by that time I was married with a child, and I swear my daughter could smell when the grant check was coming through the door. But it was a bit like that, you know. They could smell that Princey boy was coming back with money. And he walked in and he said, yeah, I can get more. He said, but one of you has got to marry this lad. He looks a bit weird. You know, he's covered in soot. His hair's all over the place. He's got these long fingernails. He said, but, you know, he'll scrub up nicely. It's the devil's son-in-law. And the two older sisters said, you've got to be joking, Dad. Well, you know, they spoke in that sort of Rodin-like manner of the best British public schools, or whatever the equivalent was in Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic or whatever, Bohemia or whatever it was in those days. Life gets confusing on the map these days with countries changing their names. And but you know, he's only the devil's, you know, he's bound to look in a state, and he's not even aristocracy. We'd be marrying down. We don't care how much trouble you get in if we do. Oh, but the little one, the youngest one, said, look, Dad, if it will keep you happy and it will keep the country afloat, I'll do it. Oh, Peter comes down and he arrives, and the poor daughter, you know, the youngest, she was sweet, but, you know, when she saw him, she fainted on the spot. He talked to her, and she got a bit more easy when she heard his voice, but he wasn't. He wasn't happy. So they put the wedding for sort of 8 days' time, and in that 8 days, Peter called the devil, said, look, he said, you said if I needed you, call. And actually, I kind of need to go back to my old self. And the devil said, not a problem. And he took him. You know, it's inevitable that there's a magic well, isn't there? You know, it's kind of, we don't even need to say that. It's a story. It's a legend. So there'll be a well, you know. I think this is why, I mean, it's a Czech story, but I think this is why so many stories are like this are based in Ireland. You know, I've been to, I went through this cave in County Clare, and there was, and it had a well at the end of it, and there was icons and religious stuff all the way down. And I'm thinking, and I felt a power from that well. It was almost like electricity coming off it. And I'm thinking, this is much older than those Christian symbols that are sitting there. That's been going on for a while. Well, it was one of those kind of wells, and the boys dipped in, and he comes out. Oh God, handsome fella, wasn't in it, and they're all the 8 days have gone by, and they're all waiting at the gate for him. She's feeling really worried because I mean, she was sweet enough, but like it was a big stretch for her to accept those nails that curl right round when they're left to go on. But they see this row of carriages, golden carriages, coming down the road, and servants, and the most handsome young boy steps out. And of course, there was a great marriage. But as for those two sisters, the devil turned round to the prince and said, "Look, I'll take both of them off your hands, and I'll marry them both." And they got what they wanted. They wanted to marry a prince, and they married Prince Lucifer himself. And so off they were gone. And as for the new bride, she turned to Peter and said, "Look, your brother-in-law, the devil's a nice enough fella, but do I have to see him too often?" And he said, "No." He said, "If we live happily, you'll never see him again." And, well, to tell you the truth, she never saw the devil again. So we can assume that it was a long and happy marriage. Oh. Right. Now, we'll go... hold on, Gary's waving at me. What do you want, Gary?
I'm waving because I thought we were finishing.
He's unmuted himself, and I can't hear a word. But okay, we'll go on to the next. Now, Colin, I'm going to you. Then I'll have a summing off Kathy. Because, we've taken all that trouble to go across the Irish Sea. So, we don't want to go backwards and forwards. And then we'll go and we'll finish up with, we'll go west. If we're coming back from Ireland, we better go West Country. So, because it's less traveling, and we don't want to, we want to look after the planet a bit. So we'll finish with Gary. So, Colin, I don't know what you're going to do for us.
John, I tell you what I'm going to do. Gary's got to go. He's on a time schedule. Can Gary go next and I'll go last? I'm happy to go last.
Right? As you like. We can go backwards and forwards. I'm not fussed. We're not on a schedule. None of us. As long as we're finished by by tomorrow, that's fine. Okay. Besides, I think I like to have a running order, and then people object to it, and we have another running order, because that makes me feel that people are taking no notice of me whatsoever, which is the way I like it. So, Gary, you'll go next.
I'm really sorry. I was trying to tell you that I thought we were finishing at 7, so I had something like backed up at 7 o'clock. And so I was happy to go off and come back another time. But let me tell the story. Thank you, Colin, for stepping aside for that. Yes, well, what I love about this story is that it's the secondary character that goes from rags to riches, and you'll understand it. And you may have heard it before, but anyway. So it was another ordinary day for Rashid as he was walking home from one of his great warehouses. He had 3 of them on the edge of town, and they supplied all of the stores in town. So he was probably one of the richest people that lived in town. And it was just a beautiful afternoon. He was walking home. The sun was shining down through the trees and casting dapple shadows on the floor, and the birds were singing, and he was full of happiness. And when he got back to his house, he greeted his wife in the usual way. hello dear, and threw straight to the back of the house to his office, and then to the hiding place that not even his wife knew about. And then he reached back to his back pocket to take out the purse with all of the takings from the 3 warehouses, and put them into their hiding place. And when he put his hand in his back pocket, so he reached to his other back pocket, right? The money wasn't there. The purse was missing. So he was straight back out to the kitchen to his wife. My purse is gone, he said. I've lost my purse with all my money in it. And she said, oh my goodness, how much did you lose? He said, 500 gold pieces. So 500 gold pieces, she said. To a man like you, that's nothing. You're probably the richest man in town. Or if you go to work tomorrow and work twice as hard, you will probably earn twice as much as that. What? Said Rashid. You don't understand. I've worked all day for that money, and it's my money, and I want it back again. Well, said his wife, if you lost the purse on your way home from work, then surely if you walk back along to the warehouses, you may come across it on your journey. Said Rashid. I remember why I married you. You're such a beautiful and wise woman, of course. All I've got to do is go and find it. So out the door he went, and back along the avenue of trees, all the way back to his warehouse. But do you think he could find that purse on his way? No, not a sign of it. So back again on the other street, just in case he had missed, other side of the street, in case he had mistaken which path he walked along. And do you think he could find his purse there? No, of course not. So when he got home, he told his wife, there was no sign of it. And she said, well, just tell me this. What kind of a fool walks all the way from his warehouse office to his home with a purse with 500 gold pieces stuck in his back pocket? No, don't tell me, she said. I already know. You might as well just go to bed and forget it. Well, he did go to bed, but if you think he forgot it, well, you'd be much mistaken, because all night long all he was thinking about was his 500 gold pieces and how was he going to get them back again. So the next morning, he woke up, and at the appropriate moment, he made his way to the palace, and he booked an appointment with the king. Now, because he was probably the richest man in the whole town, the king and he were already a little bit acquainted. So when the palace guards brought him forward, the king leant across and said, well, Rashid, my friend, and to what do we owe this honour of this visit? And Rashid said, my purse. I lost my purse on the way home from work yesterday with all my money in it. Oh dear, said the king, that's very bad news. And how much money did you have in it? 500 gold pieces, said Rashid. 500 gold pieces, said the king. But that's nothing to a man like you, probably the richest man in town. I mean, all you have to do is work a little bit harder today and you get that money back again. That's exactly what my wife said Rashid. And the problem with you and my wife is that you're both missing the point. And the point is, I worked hard for that money and I want it back again. It's mine. Well, said the king, I understand that, but what do you think, what do you expect of me? What do you want me to do about it? Well, said Rashid, I want you to put out a proclamation across the whole city to say that whoever found my purse should bring it back with all of the money in it immediately, if not sooner. And the king said, well, I could probably do that, but you must make me a promise. Should the purse come back with your 500 gold pieces in it, you must give a reward to whoever found it. Of course, said Rashid. I mean, that goes without saying. 10%, said the king. 10%? Are you serious? That's 50 gold pieces. I know how much it is, said the king. Is that or nothing? Very good, said Rashid. Of course, thank you. Good, said the king, then we are done. And Rashid bowed and left. And by the end of the day, a proclamation went out across the whole town to all of the cafes, restaurants, bars, and open spaces and places where people's met, obviously post or pre-COVID, and or post-lockdown. And the message said, whoever finds Rashid's purse with 500 gold pieces in, if you bring it back, then you will get a reward. Next morning, the palace guards came to the king, and they said, there is a woman at the gates. She is a beggar. She is in rags, and she claims to have found Rashid's purse. Oh, good, said the king. Then bring her forward and bring food and drink for her. She must be hungry, and send for Rashid. So somebody went for Rashid, and the woman was brought forward, and the king greeted her. Help yourself to the food, he said, and the drink. And She had never seen such a wealth of delights, and she began to feed off of the table and drink the drinks. Oh, it was delicious. And then the king said, "They tell me that you have found Rashid's purse." "Yes, I have," said the woman. "Oh, show me." And so she took the purse and she gave it to the king. "Is all of the money in here?" he said. "Yes, your majesty, all 500 gold pieces." That's very interesting," he said. "Tell me this, because you are obviously very, very poor. A beggar, I can see. I know. I can tell. And you found a purse with 500 gold pieces in it. Why did you not keep it? I mean, 500 gold pieces to a person like you would be set up for life. You would wear the finest clothes and eat the finest foods every day. You would never go without again. Why did you not keep it?" "Because it isn't mine," said the woman. "I was walking along the path. I saw the purse. I wondered who it belonged to. I looked inside. I couldn't believe how much money was there, but it wasn't mine. And I didn't know what to do with it. And then I heard the proclamation, and here I am." "You are a good woman, a fine woman," said the king, looking into the purse. Well, at that moment, out of breath from all the running, was Rashid and the palace guards. "Your Majesty," he said, "it must be good news if you've called me here this early in the morning." "Oh, indeed it is," said the king. "This woman here, she has found your purse for you, and it has all of the money in it. Please count it." Well, Rashid took the purse and tipped it out onto the counter and counted it all. "Is it there?" said the king. "Oh, yes," said Rashid. "Every single coin is here. Thank you so much." And he put it back into his purse. And he turned to the woman. He said, "Thank you so much for returning my purse for me. Now I must take it home and put it in its secret hiding place before anything else happens to it." And he turned and he went to leave. The king looked up and said, "Rashid, are you not forgetting something?" "Forgetting something, Your Majesty?" he said. "I don't think so. Did you not make a promise that you would give a reward?" Yes. Yes. Now that you say so, I did make such a promise today. Do you know that when I lost this purse, not only did it have 500 gold pieces, but it also had 60 silver pieces. And those 60 silver pieces are missing. She must have stolen them. And the king was shocked by these words. And he looked across at the woman. He said, "Is that right? Did you steal the 60 gold pieces?" "No, Your Majesty," said the woman. "No, I never touched any of the money. Why would I? Why would I bring the purse back having stolen it? No, I didn't." "As I suspected," said the king. "Do you know, Rashid, I'm a very busy man, and sometimes I get a bit forgetful. And I've just remembered at about the same time that you were walking along that avenue yesterday and you lost your purse. I too was walking along that avenue, and I also lost a purse with 500 gold pieces in, and it looks just like the one that you're holding in your hands there. So that purse must be mine." "Oh, no," said Rashid, because now that you say that, I remember the purse with the 500 gold pieces and the 60 silver pieces in. That's already at home in my safekeeping place. This purse with only 500 gold pieces in must be mine, the one that I lost yesterday along the path as I walked home." "No," said the king. "I think you'll find it is mine." "I don't think you can prove that," said Rashid. "Well," said the king, ignoring the slight, that's an interesting prospect," he said. Why don't you just open up the purse and take out a handful of coins?" So Rashid, he opened the purse and he reached in and he took out a handful of coins. "Now look at those coins," said the king, "and tell me, are there any faces on those coins?" "Yes, Your Majesty," said Rashid. "And tell me this, is it your face or my face that you see upon the coin?" "Your face," said Rashid. "Yes," said the king. "Because you are, after all, the king," said Rashid. "Yes," said the king. "I am, after all, the king. And I think that proves it, that those coins belong to me and not to you. So give me back the purse." Rashid handed the purse back to the king, and the king took it And he turned to the beggar woman. He said, now listen, I would like you to take this purse and spend its contents in any way that you see fit. But make me this promise. Should you ever be walking along the path and come across the other purse, the one with the 500 gold pieces in that Rashid has lost and is still out there, that you will take it to him immediately and give it back to him in return for a 50 gold piece reward. Yes, said the woman. Very good, said the king, and he gave her the purse. Now, I'm a very busy man, and our business here is done for the day. Leave. And the two of them left. And that is how that particular day ended. But how the next day began, well, I couldn't possibly tell you because I wasn't there.
Harry, that was fantastic. Seem to have lost Colin, so I'm not going to allow Cassie to have her face in a square and have her not do anything. It's I know. Cassie, have you got a little something for us?
Yeah, I'll do a little something. This is called November Sun. November, Belfast is Baltic, but the Christmas shoppers are out in force already, and my doorway stinks the night of urine and whiskey and unknown things. I pull my scarf up over my nose against the stench, and I focus on breathing through my mouth. And I'm watching shoppers who think they're cold because they have to walk 10 minutes from the shopping centre to their air-conditioned 4x4. Well, trust me, they have never been cold. I mean, so cold that your bones turn to steel, soldered together at the joints, making the slightest movement impossible. I mean, so cold that you don't drink after 4 o'clock because the thought of getting out of your sleeping bag at night for a wee, it makes you cry, like real, actual tears. A lady bought me a coffee earlier. Nice enough, I suppose. Oh, until she said, I didn't want to give you money, love, in case you drank it. You know, the last time I drank out here was my first week when I couldn't sleep. And I woke up with a strange man's hands in my places and spaces. I have not drank since. And when I told Kelly, she gave me 8 nappy pins. He only groped me. I told her, I'm not pregnant. No, she said, and she pressed them into my palm. You fasten your t-shirt to your knickers, then your jumper to your jeans, then your coat to everything. It'll give you time to scream, Danielle. Or if I know you, time to fight. A man crouches down and he puts a pound in my dish. Have you no people, love? And I almost answer him, almost. I've had people all my life. I've had caseworker people and social worker people who are now floating support worker people, community outreach people. I had a chance to have people once. I was fostered when I was 12. I went to live with this lady called Sally and her 3 daughters, and Sally loved hard. She made you breakfast and sandwiches for school and dinner. She washed all your clothes. Christ, she even ran me a bath, but I had no idea how to react to that. Where was the temper? Where was the snap that I was used to? I did not trust her. So I decided I would expose her, because in my world, nobody's that kind. Not really. So I lied. I stole. I cursed. And I talked back. And when that didn't work, I went to her weakness. I went after her kids. On the day she saw me hit her youngest, she stood with her mouth open like a wound, but she still didn't snap. She sat me down a few days later, though, and said she was sorry. Jesus, she was sorry. She said she tried really hard, but that it was best for everyone if I didn't stay. She took my face in her hands and she kissed me on the forehead and she said, someday, Danielle, you're gonna have to let somebody love you. And the way that she looked at me, God, that look, it was like standing in the full heat of the sun with your arms stretched wide, head back, eyes closed, letting that warmth fill all your spaces, right to the edges, so there's no gaps left. That was my chance to have people, and I blew it. Christ, it is freezing out here tonight. There's a lady coming towards me now with this North Face jacket and this fancy bag held just so. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna ask her for change. I've been out here 4 months. I've never asked, but there's £1.34 in my dish and it's 10 o'clock at night. So this is it. I'm a real life beggar now. I can fall no further. I've watched others do this so many times. Can you spare some change? Can you spare some change? Can you spare some change? Becoming more invisible with each plea. So now it's my turn. No shame, no gain. But just as I'm about to speak, she looks at me with utter disgust and says, no change. Well, I can't help it. Humiliation explodes inside me. I never asked you, you stuck-up cow. I hunker down inside my sleeping bag. I check that my nappy pins are in place and I close my eyes and I hear somebody call my name, but I stay where I am. There must be 1,000 Danielles. Somebody grabs my foot through my sleeping bag and shakes it. And I'm back there with Sally shaking my foot through the duvet. Come on, Danielle. You're going to be late for school, love. And the memory wins me like a punch. And I tell myself that I can't be, but Christ, I want it to be. So bad. I don't breathe in case I break the spell up here over my sleeping bag. And her brown hair is salted at the roots. She has these wrinkles on her cheeks. I sent her get as spider's webs, but I swear it's Sally, all right. Because as I look at her, I can feel the heat of the sun. Thanks, John.
Ah, you've got to come on as often as you can, Kathy.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, you went into character too, because that was just heartfelt. With the hat on, you were just wow. Thank you.
Now,
Oh,
right. Well, I'm glad I'm not Colin. Colin, have you got a little something for us?
I have indeed, John. That's our Kathy. Fantastic, isn't she? Great stuff. I've heard that 3 or 4 times and it just never loses its power, no matter how many times you hear it. Fantastic stuff. I had a wee story which now doesn't fit. I couldn't tell the story that I was going to tell after that because it wouldn't be meaty enough, I don't think. So I'm going to tell you another one. And I'm going to have to kind of go off theme a tiny wee bit. Not so much, because this is not a rags to riches story. This is a riches to rags story. And I love this story, and I've known it since I was a very young teenager. I read it in a book. It wasn't a book of stories. It just is part of a narrative in a fantastic book. If you ever get the chance to read it, it's called The Wildfowler by Roger Moran, and it's just a magical book. I've read it probably more times than any other book in my life. I must have read it 20 times and more. Anyway, I don't even think I have a name for this story, but it starts with a Spanish nobleman. And he was so wealthy and so powerful, there was no one to touch him in his homeland. He was as rich a man as you could imagine. And he had a daughter who he absolutely adored. And against his feelings of his heart and his better judgment, he sent her away to be educated at a convent school. He felt that he, despite the pain of doing that, that would be the best thing for her. And so she went off to this convent to become a lady and to learn French and to learn English and Latin, and would come back a mature, eligible young woman that any prince in Europe would be happy to wed. And so on the night of her return, when she was 18 years old, her father arranged the most wonderful banquet, and he invited all his rich and powerful and noble friends from all across Europe. And even in a land celebrated for its beautiful woman, in this throng of people, his daughter stood out. She was absolutely beautiful. Her hair fell in jet black ringlets down her back, the kind of jet black ringlets you only hear sung about in folk songs. Her cheeks were like pink roses, and they felt like rose petals. She could have had her pick from any eligible bachelor in Europe. But sadly for her father, not even one of them, not even one, caught her eye. She was not interested at all. But there was a young servant boy, a boy who her father had taken into his court when he was a baby. He had been left at the gates of the big house, and he had been taken in, and he had been looked upon by the nobleman's wife as the son that she never had. But of course, he was just a servant boy after all. And he waited on the top table. He waited on his master, and of course, on his master's family. And the moment that young lady's eyes met with the young servant boy, well, something happened. Their hearts went sideways. They fell instantly and irreversibly in love with one another, as only young people like that can do. You see, no one really noticed this little frisson, this exchange of glances. And no one except that was the princess's mother. She noticed it. And knowing her husband's fiery temper, she decided not to say anything. And so she kept a watch. She kept an eye on her daughter and the young man. And she told the other servants, her closest confidants in the staff, to let her know what was going on. Then one morning, her chambermaid came to her and said that her daughter was missing. She had checked her chamber and the room was empty. The bed hadn't even been slept in. Well, the mother knew exactly what had happened, of course. And now, very reluctantly, she had to tell her husband what she knew. He sent for the servant boy immediately. Of course, he was gone as well. He called for his horse, and he strapped on his sword. He was a rich and powerful man. Everyone in the land lived in fear of him, or lived in fear of his power anyway. And so when he asked a question, he got an answer immediately. And it didn't take him very long to track down the young servant boy and his daughter. They were in a boarding house just a few miles away. He didn't even knock on the door. He broke it down, and the young couple jumped from their bed naked. With one blow of his sword, he decapitated the young servant boy. His daughter ran to her lover's side. She took what was left of him in her arms and screamed like a witch. And then, in his anger, the nobleman pushed that cold steel through her heart. And with her dying breath, she said, oh, Father, we were married. You have killed your grandchild as well. And then she died. The nobleman threw down his sword in that place, and he ran and ran and ran. They say he ran for a day and a night before he collapsed with exhaustion. And by good fortune or intention, I cannot tell you, but he lay at the door of a monastery. Early the next morning, the monks found him lying there, and they carried him in and they tended to him, and he was well cared for. They could see that he was a nobleman. He was finely dressed, albeit that he was dirty and disheveled. Well, he regained his consciousness a few days later, and you can only imagine the weight of guilt and sorrow that pressed down on him. He eventually came before the abbot, and he told his story, told the terrible, terrible thing that he done. And the abbot said, there is no forgiveness for you in this world. You have committed a terrible, terrible sin. You're doomed to wander the earth until you find the land of Gurt. And there you will end your days in poverty, begging God's forgiveness. And that's what happened. The nobleman wandered the highways and byways of Europe, looking for the land of Gurt. Many, many, many years passed, and his weary footsteps found him across the Irish Sea in Erin's Green Isle. He went north, south, east, and west, and eventually he found himself on the western seaboard of Ireland, near a place called the Deal Estuary, where the River Deal flows out into the Atlantic. It was the springtime of the year, and he sat down to bathe his weary feet. And from a cabin, he heard a woman shouting to her son, Kieran, Kieran, go and fetch the goats from Gurt Nascura. Gurt Nascura. With a great effort, he raised himself up. He went to the woman and he said, did you just say the word Gurt? I did, of course, she said. Isn't that where the goats are? And the nobleman fell to his knees and he held his hands in prayer and he said, thank God, at last my journey is over. Well, he went along the riverbank and he set up a little camp, and he started to tend the poor people as best he could. Very quickly, he got the reputation as being a pilgrim healer. People began to come from far and wide. They'd heard of his reputation. They said he was a great healer. Well, an order of monks came, and they came to expose this charlatan as they thought he was. But after a very short time, they stayed and they built an abbey around his ministry. And he lived for many, many years tending the poor people in this locality. And before he died, he asked that there be no stone to mark his last resting place. but a young monk, a stonecutter who was involved in the building of a great abbey there. He found a little piece of black marble, and he carved a little black figurine, and he set it into a nave in the abbey. It became locally, and still is known locally, as the Black Man, and people come from miles around believing that it possesses the healing powers that this Spanish nobleman once had. And beside it is a little inscription which says, "Pass me by, I am a stranger." Thank you.
Colin, you never fail to surprise us, and you never fail to bring up something. It's, I mean, what a great evening it's been. We've looked, you know, we've delved back into the past, we've delved into folklore, we've had the contemporary tales of social media and homeless and contemporary homelessness. It's been brilliant. Thank you, Colin, Shane, Gary, if he was still here, but I'll shout loud and he might hear me down in Cornwall. Kerry, and where's Kathy? There she is. Fantastic. All come and visit us again. Next Monday is Shelley Verma, brilliant storyteller, Indian woman who lives in Switzerland. Is running the Monday night for International Women's Day, and tomorrow night, of course, we've got our young tellers. That's an hour earlier at 5 o'clock. Our young international tellers. Sunday, just a sec. I've got I don't. Just a sec. I'm gonna. Oh. No, I'm got an answer yet, so I won't drop a minute. So Friday, someone is going to do us do us our children's night, and if they look at the messages, they might actually see a message where I've asked them, but I won't put them on the spot. That would be a very cruel thing to do, even if they are a great friend. But Saturday, it's a bit non-stop here. Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, we've got our Australian and Asian tellers, because that way they get to take part, because if we do it too late, we have to get them up in the middle of the night. And Sunday, you're all welcome back to tell tales and poems. Our worldwide story round. So please come and visit us. You can make us laugh, you can make us cry, you can do what you like. Mike Rust runs that from Get a Word in Edgeways. Baden, even you're allowed on that platform. You're coming up to East Anglia, aren't you, during the once we're allowed, right, I've just got an answer back. There is a possibility that the children's stories on Friday night might be Shane Ibbs. He claims he's got to check his diary. Liar, that's just being a flash git, isn't it? Gotta check my diary, see if I'm free. Like you're able to do that much at the moment.
Actually, John, Fridays is the day when I do have a few things to do. So I should be all right, but I just need to check the time.
You need to check your diary, yeah. Okay, flash git.
Somewhere in the forest there's a tree that needs climbing.
Yeah.
Somewhere in a forest there's a tree that needs climbing.
Yeah, there's a tree. Yeah. He can socially distance from human beings in the middle of a forest, can't he? And Baden, sometime in the future, just let me know when you're free on a Friday night, because you are genuinely busy, because you're a genuine working man. And
my sound's gone, John. I can't hear you.
Lies. But you can let me know when you're free on a Friday. You can do our children's night. You can do a children's night for us.
Yeah, you know I'm good for it, man.
Yeah. But unlike Shane, you have genuine reasons for not being available. But enough levity. It's been a brilliant night. Thank you all once more. And we'll see you as often as possible on this platform. Thank you, Ali, for driving the bus as per usual.
Great night, John. Thanks.
Brilliant stuff.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for all of you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Stay safe, everyone. Nice to see you, Colin.
Thank you.
See you, Kerry. Kathy.
See you
See you,
soon.
my friends.
Bye.
Have a good
Okay.
evening.
Okay, ciao.
See you, Baden.
See you soon, Shane, man. Take it easy.
Yeah, and you, buddy.